It's, again, a very specific target. The students know exactly what they need to do to show that they've demonstrated to you an understanding of the criteria to measure success. Now, I pulled this one from the Virginia Standards of Learning, and I know that we've probably all seen things like this in whatever our framework is, whatever it's science, chemistry, foreign language, or of course the histories. The student will demonstrate knowledge of ancient Rome from 700 BC to 500 AD in terms of its impact on Western civilization by sequencing events leading to Roman military domination of the Mediterranean basin in Western Europe and the spread of Roman culture. Now, in all honesty, this is something that's probably going to take several days, so I'm just going to look at part of it as we go through. But you can see this is really difficult for me, a history teacher, to unpackage. I surely can't imagine a student would be able to figure out what all this means. It essentially would intimidate me if I walked into a classroom as a 9th grader and this was the objective posted. I would have absolutely no clue what we're going to be doing that day, and I'm not sure I'm going to have a better understanding of it as a result. So let's improve upon it. As a matter of fact, what I did was I went back to a lesson plan from about 8 years ago, and this is the objective that I had. It's better. We're trying to make it even better and show how learning targets apply to it as we go through. Students will create an annotated map and timeline explaining how Rome came to dominate the Mediterranean basin. Now, I can make it better, I think, and it's just a little semantic tweak here. You will create an annotated map or timeline explaining how Rome came to dominate the Mediterranean basin. Just the fact that you're turning that word into the student, into you or we, you're showing that this is something the students are going to be responsible for. It's a small little change. Now, I think we can make it even better still. You will explain how Rome came to dominate the Mediterranean basin. The reason I think this is better is because you are going to now have the opportunity for the students to maybe develop some own ways of measuring whether they can achieve this learning target, whether they can hit that bullseye with this. And it also gives you the opportunity to maybe differentiate instruction within your class so that not all students are going to be doing the same activity. You can change the activity based upon your students' needs, interests, groupings, etc. So the first thing, once you post that learning objective, you want to share it with the student. Maybe some things that you want to do is get that end goal in mind. Again, begin with the end in mind. Show the students some examples. So perhaps you don't have good examples from years past. That's fine. Use some bad examples. Perhaps you don't have any examples because it's a new lesson or you've thrown away other things. Then create some of your own or talk to the students as you create a rubric. We'll talk about that in a second to say, hey, how can we do this? If you can, use real life examples about why the students need to know this, how it relates maybe to something that you studied prior, how it's going to lead to future understanding of how, for example, in this case, how Rome came to be one of the world's most significant powers ever. Again, this is a shared process. So again, to get to that bullseye, you're constantly assessing where the students are. Don't just state the objective or the learning target at the beginning of class and then never come back to it. That's not effective. So maybe after your lecture, you stop, you share the learning target with them again, and you see, can they get closer to that bullseye after your lecture? And then the next activity, we're going to move forward, and this is how it's going to help us understand and move towards getting that bullseye. So you're constantly referencing that learning target, or you're constantly getting the students to reference that learning target through formative assessment and through some other strategies as well. So there are different ways that you can share this learning target throughout the class. One way is what they call the 4-step framework. And this is where you simply answer these questions. What are we learning? How can we show that we demonstrate a knowledge of this? To know how well we are learning this, these are the look-fors that we're going to see. And it's important for us to learn this because, and I like that number 4 right there, because it really relates to a couple of things on the observation protocol that we're using this year, where you're talking about building on prior knowledge, building on future knowledge, and relating it to the world that we currently live in. So whenever you can get that, you know you're going to get the students to buy into because they see the importance of what you're actually studying. So the 4-step framework is one way. Another way is the I CAN framework. This one's a little bit easier. The I CAN, we are learning to state the learning target. And then you will know you're able to do this when you say, I can blank, blank, blank. And it might be several different things. Now, here's an example going back to our Roman expansion. And I've chunked this into a little bit smaller thing because that's truly a pretty massive one. My learning target for today is explain how Rome came to dominate the Mediterranean basin. I will know I've hit this target when I can label shade the areas controlled by Rome, I can explain the causes of Roman expansion, and I can describe the events of the Punic Wars. Now, I know my history teachers are telling me that Rome continued to expand after the Punic Wars. I know that, but for the purposes of this, I want to keep it relatively simple. Other ways of sharing. Get the students to paraphrase it. Okay, what are we looking to accomplish today? How can we show this? Create and use rubrics. Share some own rubrics that you've created. Have the students create rubrics. I was amazed. I know one year I had the students create the rubrics for each of the assignments as we went through, and man, were they harsh on each other. When I was saying maybe 3 or 4 examples, they were saying 5 or 6. So they really have high standards for themselves. And when they set those standards, they're more likely to achieve them. Do a think, pair, share. What are some ways that you guys can show me that Roman expansion? And then have the students individually think of some things, pair up, and then share it. Again, it seems like it takes some time, but you're getting the students to buy into the learning target, beginning with the end in mind. So what is the value of this whole process? Students monitor their progress and they're working towards a goal. They're going to be more motivated to achieve when they're sharing the responsibility for learning. They're going to be able to check their own outcomes and they'll be able to redirect their unsuccessful efforts. We know we're not going to hit the bullseye every time. And as you go through, it's sort of like in the Olympic archery. You see them shooting at a close target, a medium target, and then a further distance target. And that's essentially what you're going to be doing throughout the day. You're going to be progressively putting that target further away, making it more difficult, maybe as you move up, for example, Bloom's taxonomy. So what are we looking for when we enter the classroom? Now, that's really not what it matters. What matters is what's best for the students. And I think all these things are what's best for students and what's best for learning. Posted and shared learning target. Students understand the target and are engaged in activities that deepen their understanding of the learning target. They're able to monitor their own progress. They can say, I get this, I don't get this. They can say on a rating scale, on a scale of 1 to 4, where are you right now? I'm at a 3. I think I got it, but I don't necessarily have it. It's amazing when you ask the students those types of questions, how honest they truly are. The learning target, as I said, is shared. You have the look fors. You have some ideas and processes that you've developed before the instruction begins on how you can make sure the students are actually learning the material. And again, the big thing, what are the students doing? It's not about what the teacher does. It's about what the students are doing and what the students are learning. So often, when I'm in the classroom, you probably see me do this. What did you learn today? Why are you doing this? What can you do now, that should be now, not no, that you couldn't do before? All of those are questions that I know I've asked in the classroom, I know I've asked them in the hallways, I know I've even asked them in the cafeteria to make sure the students understand what they are doing. And you know what? Most of the time, the students are able to tell you exactly why they're doing it. Now, occasionally I do get the, we're doing this worksheet. Well, why are you doing the worksheet, I'll ask? Because I have to do it for a grade. Well, besides the grade, what is the worksheet trying to cover? I don't know. It's just what the teacher told us to do. Those are some of the conversations that we have on the negative side. Much more often, the students can say, hey, we're doing this because we have to show the various steps to the scientific method, for example. Saw that in some of the biology classes and earth science classes that I visited earlier in the week, for example. Great story, I think, or analogy to end here is in terms of beginning with the end in mind. And it came from, again, this book, Learning Targets. One of the authors talked about how she really loved her mom's meatloaf and apple pie. She knew what it tasted like from the beginning. So she asked for the recipe, followed the various steps. She was happy with the meatloaf. She wasn't too happy with the apple pie. She couldn't get the crust right. So she had that target and she knew where she was working. So she knew she had to go back and fix the crust, and she had to go back and continually work on the crust. Why was she able to do this? Because she knew what a good apple pie and a good meatloaf tasted like, because it was in her mind from the beginning. She began with the end in mind. I hope this cleared up some of the questions that you might have about what we're going to be looking for when we enter your classroom and what's best for students in terms of approaching learning and learning targets. We'll focus more on this next week as well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And if you want to borrow the book, Learning Targets, I know I have a copy, and a couple other teachers and administrators also have copies.